So remember when S-Blast got revealed? I mean, out of all the new weapons we've seen in trailers, this was the one people seemed to believe in the most upon first impressions. Then the weapon came out. I personally had some good tournament runs with it that you might have seen, and then it kind of faded away. Okay, well, obviously a lot of people thought that was just the kit. Only insane human beings would possibly tolerate a weapon with Sprinkler and Reef Slider. Luckily, 6 months later, S-Blast 91 arrived with Booyah Bomb and Burst Bomb, a nearly perfect kit for it, and it got 2 notable buffs between that time. Now, we will truly see this weapon thrive and see what it can... Oh, it has no results? Like none? Like we've had like almost 3 months with this kit now. Nobody wants to use it? So people have started to bring up that this weapon kind of vanished after the hype. And I had a lot of opinions on this weapon upon launch. So I think it's a good time to revisit this weapon all this time later and figure out what happened. Be sure to subscribe if you enjoy this weapon breakdown for more in the future. Let's get started. I think it's important to break down this weapon in a bit more detail. First off is the short range mode. This has the best area of effect in the entire game, meaning its radius size is the largest, tied with Clash. However, it's also just as slow as Range Blaster, making your speed and kill time difficult, especially without any distance to buy you time. You have to use a lot of cover effectively, which you can do a bit better due to the size of the radius though. But keep in mind, because of how slow your fire rate is, pretty much anything up close to you is going to be killing you faster. Even the other blasters like Reg Blast and Luna are way faster than you. The shot is also pretty accurate now though after the buff. 1 to 2 subs of Intensify actions scale fairly well with this. However, the direct range is pretty limited to say the least. This is also the mode you're forced to get after wall jumps or Squid Surge, which can sometimes not be very optimal. Its short range mode is definitely worse than the most comparable thing being Luna Blaster. While the radius is a bit larger, the speed gap is just way worse, and the RNG on Luna is actually a good bit better anyway. However, obviously, S-Blast has the trade-off of having a long range mode as well, which this is the one I think got a lot of people hype. It has both a little bit more direct range than Range Blaster, it has perfect jump accuracy, and the bullet travel speed is fast, reaching its max range about 4 frames faster than Range Blaster, which is pretty good. This makes directs easier, and while you do have to buffer your shot a bit after leaving the ground or just drop off a ledge in order to get it, it's still incredible to be able to shoot with perfect accuracy. The downside to this weapon is the area of effect size is tiny. So small, in fact, pretty much no other blaster could serve for a reference as to how this would actually function. Let me give you a sense of scale here. Flash Blaster and S-Blast short range mode have a radius of 4 units. Range Blaster has 3.5 units, with Luna being slightly more than that. Vanilla Blaster and both Rapid Blasters have a radius of 3.3 units. S-Blast long range mode has a radius size of 1.8 units, which is about half the radius size of Range Blaster. Out of all the initial hype this weapon got, this was the most overlooked downside. At first, while small, it seemed easy enough to work around, but as the meta developed, long range area of effect seemed to be stronger and stronger as time went on, especially with other things that developed, such as Zuka getting buffed and being a huge deal to combo off its 53 damage. Another thing that happened is the size of the area effect made its range value seem a lot worse than you might think, particularly against mid-range weapons. While Range Blaster can struggle with Squeezer, like pretty much everything else does, it does good into other options, such as Splatana Stamper and Nautilus. However, S-Blast has way worse range than Range Blaster when it comes to the area of effect because of its size, as well as a lot smaller of a hitbox, which means most mid-range matchups for it are pretty horrible. While long range still has a bit better mobility due to the ability to jump, as well as better directs due to the speed making it a bit more reliable, the jump mode basically became a shorter squiffer with a small blast radius if you're a tad off. You can't even really use it to poke around corners. I would go as far as to say this weapon doesn't have long range AoE. You basically shoot targets in the open with it, which is difficult when you're as slow as Range Blaster. Now, obviously 2 things can help with this. One of which is, well, you have both firing modes. No blaster has multiple range values or area of effect sizes to play off of, and yeah, it's a really valuable strength, especially as you learn to combine both of these modes. But is it actually enough to make up for the weapon's flaws? Well, before we answer that, let's take a look at how the good kit plays into this. Burst Bomb is cheap, helps with movement, and most importantly, has combos as well as a way to poke with a longer range, even if it's weaker AoE than base blaster shots. The only real downside of this this sub is that these combos are really difficult. You need to hit the inside 25% of either blast radius to combo. Now, if you're using the short range mode, that's not too bad. However, with long range, this is what 25% of that looks like. So yeah, good luck getting combos without hitting a direct burst bomb. And that's assuming opponents aren't wearing sub defense either. One sub is pretty common and makes this radius even worse. Not trying to take away how good burst bomb is by any means, but if you're expecting grim range burst combos, you're a bit mistaken. Booyah Bomb, on the other hand, I would say lived up to all the hype. There's not too much to say here. Being able to have a panic option on a slow area of effects weapon and a displacement paint tool is just too good. Machine already taught us that, and it's no different here. The only thing worth noting though is at 190p with how abysmal this weapon paints, you aren't gonna have very many booyahs. So now that we've fully broken down this weapon, let's talk about it. I would still say S-Blast is probably around the realm of a high tier weapon. The powerful direct hits, large area of effect in short range, and strong kit definitely put it above most weapons in the game. But S-Blast's main problem isn't a lack of potential. S-Blast has always had potential, and people have always noticed that. For weapons to be picked in competitive though, there has to be a bit more of a reason. What does S-Blast bring to the table? If your answer is an area of effect Booyah Bomb weapon, then you may want to remember that Machine exists. Can S-Blast in other ways fight better than Machine? Sure, but you're slower with a smaller blast radius and way less pain and special output since you don't have Fizzy Spam to fall back on. The problem with S-Blast is that it's a high investment weapon. Most of what makes it worth it is either very specific positions or the ability to make incredibly difficult plays with your direct hits. And if you can't make these plays consistently during a game, your weapon's value is, well, just bad. Range Blaster, for another comparison, has difficult directs as well and a hard spacing requirement at top level with how fast people get. But it has much more favorable matchups, especially against mid-range weapons that are a bit slower, and a more acceptable passive play, since you can poke around with your large range area of effect around corners, or combo with specials effectively. While Range Blaster has a high skill ceiling, it has a much lower skill floor than S-Blast. Let me put it this way, the level of play you need to be able to be at to get even moderate value with S-Blast is higher than almost anyone is able to actually play consistently, which means the only chance you see people make this weapon worth it is if they're one-tricks, or at least dedicating a lot of time to it. Now, S-Blast isn't the only weapon like this. There's stuff like Splatoon Stamper and Tenebrella, which are also very dedicated weapons people usually have to put a lot of time into. But with those weapons, there is a lot more extreme strengths than S-Blast has. Stamper has devastating one-shot combos while still having a movement option that can one-shot you up close. And Tenebrella has such a large and high HP shield that it completely reshapes team fights. S-Blast gets to alternate between being a slightly worse Luna and Squiffer. S-Blast is just too risky to be worth picking, and it's too difficult to fall into niche situations. It's not bad, but when looking at what to pick, weapons like other more consistent blasters for niche situations, such as Vanilla Blaster, or most notably Range Blaster and Machine, just generally seem to be a lot more consistent ass for players to pick up. Balancing weapons is hard, and this is why I stress that high difficulty weapons like Dually Squelcher, which has similar issues to S-Blast, need to be able to be worth the investment. While S-Blast could probably win if someone wanted to be dedicated to it, I don't think it's worth the investment right now, and should be buffed subsequently. There are two real routes they could go with this. I think the more boring way could be making it a flex pick that's easy to use in some situations. The easiest way to do this would probably be lowering the end lag a bit, which I wouldn't mind in general. However, I think the cooler way to buff it is keep it as a one-trick weapon, and give it more potential with it. For example, this could be giving the long-range area of effect mode a bit more damage, so it can go for burst combos while still being difficult. And that's a way you can keep the AoE small, or maybe even just giving the long-range mode a bit more range and even more shot velocity, so it can go for snipes at something like Jet Squelcher range, for instance. S-Blast still does have so much potential, and it's one of the most fun weapons I've ever played. I love the design of this thing, and I hope one day it'll be more worth players' time so we can see someone do cool things with the weapon. But for the time being, I can totally see why it's not worth it to pretty much everyone out there, and that's a bit of an unfortunate fate for the time being. So hopefully we'll see it get a bit better. Let me know your thoughts on S-Blast in the comments below, and I'll see you all next time.